What's up, everyone? Welcome back to District Baseball. It is a great episode. It is that time of the year. Trey and I are giving our All-Star picks. We are not only picking from the finalists, but we are talking snubs. We're talking our own picks, our homer picks, our bias picks, the everything in between, everything that the MLB got wrong, which is a lot. But we'll cover all of that and more in this episode. Can't wait to dive into it. But first, Trey, what's going on?
Nick, I'm really excited to talk All-Stars, man. It's always a fun time of year, even though it's always also a time of year that makes us upset because fan voting is just not the best way to do it. But at the same time, I feel like they did okay this time around. The National League maybe got a little infected with Phillies fans. But other than that, I feel like they did all right this time around. So,
it's better than, 7 Royals being voted to the All-Star game
there's certainly been worse.
2015 or whatever.
There's definitely been worse years than this one. The Phillies fans definitely got in there a bit, but they are one of the best teams in baseball at least, so that makes some sense.
Yeah.
I think there's a good crop here. There's definitely guys that should probably be there that we will probably talk about in our lineups. But for the most part, I don't have too many complaints with this list of players.
No, honestly, I don't either. I have one, but that's more due to circumstance, not because of the initial voting. Okay. I just like to, pile on MLB whenever I get a shot. So,
it's not like Manfred's done anything to deserve any goodwill. So
no, not at all. But let's get into it. Let's go over our All-Star picks. Let's start AL? Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good. Let's start AL.
All right, we're just gonna go in the voting order in terms of if you were to go online and vote, the position order in that respect. So we'll start at first base. I'll take this one because he's earned it, and everyone knows in my heart of hearts my wagon brother deserves to be an all-star starter. Vladimir Guerrero
He's
Jr.
back.
The
wagon brother is back.
Yeah, he's an all-star starter. He actually has been performing much better as of late, so he's actually earned it. It's not like too much of a stretch, but he's my all-star starter for sure.
Yeah, and I am in agreement with you. I put Vladdy as my first base starter. The voters wanted Ryan Mountcastle as the other one. This is actually, I do have a slight issue with that, him being the second guy, but Vladdy, I think, is the starter. Like, I feel like he's kind of, this past month, elevated himself above anybody else in the American League at first base. There is some solid guys, but yeah, I think Vladdy should be the starter here.
Love that. Second base, again, this one feels obvious. I don't think there's too much of a discussion. Jose Altuve is doing Jose Altuve things, and it's like we talked about in our second base rankings in the offseason. Until he proves otherwise, he's the best second baseman in baseball. So, best second baseman in baseball kind of needs to be an all-star starter, so Jose Altuve gets my vote.
And once again, we are in agreement. I am with Jose Altuve, although I did have one stipulation here. When I was looking over all the players, Jordan Westburg, who's actually a finalist for third base, has played about half his games at second base, and he's had a really, really good season. I feel like he's kind of in a position where
he's in a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, if he was at second base, he might have a chance at being the starter here. But as a third baseman listed, he's not going to have a chance. Although he should still make the team. So I was considering him, but at the end of the day, it's definitely got to be Altuve because that is his primary position. And he just kind of continues to be Jose Altuve out there. He is going to hit pull-side homers. He's going to put together great at-bats. He's aggressive. He's going to hit for average. He's pretty much doing all that this year.
Yep. Third base, the aforementioned Jordan Westburg is a finalist, but it's really hard to go against Jose Ramirez, and I didn't. I went with Jose Ramirez. He's having an amazing season. If his season ended today, which I very much hope it does not, he has a very, very solid season. That's how good he's been in this first half. 280, 23 home runs, 76 RBIs already. And the Guardians are one of the biggest surprises in baseball this season, and Jose Ramirez is a large part of that. We're talking about a career year trajectory for Jose Ramirez, so he definitely deserves to be an all-star starter.
Yeah, I mean, he once again pacing for another MVP top 5 finish. Just as always, the solid presence in that Guardian lineup. And they've actually added more offense this year, so he hasn't had to kind of carry that load as much. He's just kind of been he's still putting up the same kind of stats that he has for years, but it's less. You don't have to rely on it as much, which probably feels nice for him, just having a little bit of that pressure off.
Yep.
But yeah, once again, doing the same thing. He's not going to walk a lot, but he's not going to strike out. He's aggressive, and he is going to hit for a ton of power from both sides of the plate. And I don't really think you can put another guy above him at third base right now in the American League.
No, not at all. Shortstop, it pains my soul because Bobby Witt Jr. was my
this one's brutal.
hot take. And it also does not feel like a true all-star lineup without Bobby Witt Jr. in the starting lineup. Like, I almost want to, move him to DH. But then you look at DH, and there's another pretty solid guy down there that is hard to leave out. So I did not go Bobby Witt Jr. He's the 10th man for all intents and purposes. But Gunnar Henderson has been the best player in baseball. So he needs to be in there. And, that's where my vote went as well. But Bobby Witt Jr. is having also a phenomenal season.
Yeah, this one hurts a lot because you can't argue Bobby Witt over Henderson at this point because Gunnar Henderson is a freaking superstar right now. But obviously I think Witt has had a good enough season to be a starter somewhere.
Let's
throw him in. You know what? Throw him in the National League outfield.
Yeah,
that's where I put him.
There we go. Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah, but yeah, so it's got to be Gunnar. He's obviously been arguably the best player in baseball this year. I think the consensus right now is that he is, although Judge is hot on his tail.
In terms of FWAR, he's
currently ranked first. So yeah. Absolutely. No issue with getting him there. It just we both really like Witt a lot, so it's just damn. He's tough. Obviously having Witt in any other year is having an MVP type season. It's just there's a couple guys that are having extra MVP seasons somehow.
Super
I don't know.
MVP.
Yeah, super MVPs. But yeah, Gunnar Henderson's got to be the shortstop.
Yeah, agreed. All right, moving on to catcher. So this is the easiest one for me of the ballot, not because of the stats, but just because the second finalist is not a catcher. He's a DH. Adley Rutschman is the clear-cut answer here, not only because he's probably the best he is the best catcher in baseball, but Salvador Perez is no longer a catcher. He's a DH. And listen, he's having a great season, probably deserves to be an all-star. He's not a catcher. He doesn't belong in the catcher conversation. Put him in the DH category. And that's fine. That's why the DH category exists. But Adley Rutschman is the answer right here.
Yeah, I mean, he's played about half his games at catcher this year, but that's not going to be enough when you got Adley. Hold on. Adley definitely DHs, though. I got to look at the numbers
Not
here.
to that extent.
Probably. Well, also, Salvy's playing a lot of first base this year, too.
Well, that's more so my point.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I actually really liked watching Salvy play this year. But yeah, Adley's got to be the guy again. I feel like the American League was a lot more they have the top guys are just more obvious here.
It gets to a real conversation in the NL.
Yeah,
sure.
the National League is definitely a lot more less clear cut here because I don't think you really can't argue Adley shouldn't be the guy here. There's other great players, obviously, but not to his level this season. Not in the American League. Another guy that's interesting to me is David Fry for the Guardians, just because he's listed as a catcher, although he's really not done much catching. He's mostly been in the outfield and DH, but he's having a really good year. But yeah, it's got to be Adley here.
Yep. All right, moving on to the outfield. This one is a little bit, I will say, tougher just in terms of you only get 2 votes because Judge was the top vote getter in the AL, so he's automatically in, but at the same time, is it really an all-star ballot? Yeah, is it really an all-star ballot if Judge wasn't in to begin with? So Aaron Judge is in. That's kind of just chalk. The next 2, in my mind, you have 3 guys for 2 spots. You have Juan Soto, Steven Kwan, Kyle Tucker. And ultimately, I went with Soto and Kwan just because Tucker has been a little banged up. But there was a stretch where Kyle Tucker looked like the best player in baseball. And I certainly think he deserves to be an all-star. And if something drastic changes over this next week or so, like Kyle Tucker hits 7 home runs in a 4-game series or something like that, then yeah, maybe that edges out. I would probably bump Kwan first, even though I really like what Stephen Kwan has been doing. But you can't bump Juan Soto. They won't bump Juan Soto, even though it's fan voting. They're not going to bump Juan Soto out of an all-star starter spot, and I don't think he deserves to be bumped either. So Soto and Kwan get my vote, with Kyle Tucker just on the outside looking in.
It's wild, man. The Yankees, it's Soto and Judge are both 5+ WAR players, and then it's just everybody else. I mean, it's crazy. Now Kwan's doing it in a shorter period of time. He's also been hurt this year, but he's healthy right now. Whereas Kyle Tucker, I believe, is still on the injured list.
Yeah, Thank you for clarifying.
Because Kyle Tucker would have been my pick, 100%. It would have been Judge, Soto, Tucker if he was healthy right now.
Such a good outfield. Holy hell.
Future Yankees outfield. Oh god.
God.
Anyways, my other guy I wanted to mention was Jarren Duran, just because I feel like he's had such a great all-around season. And one thing about all-star voting is when you go to vote, there's only offensive stats. There's no defense. There's not. I think there's stolen bases, but they're not telling you how efficient they are. Not telling you how good they are compared to the rest of the league.
Yeah, just the sexy stats.
Just the sexy offensive stats, which I get. It's a casual event. You know, you want stats that fans understand. But at the same time, Jarren Duran deserves a lot of credit for being one of the better base runners in baseball this year and one of the better defenders this year in the outfield. And also, he's hitting pretty darn well. Considering all that, he's got a 130 WRC plus, 3.4 F WAR. So I wanted to give him a shout out. But either way, it's probably still Judge, Soto, Kwan as of right now, just because you can't take Kwan out the way he's been hitting over the last month and a half. It's kind of ridiculous how he's been doing it. So and it's cool to see a contact-oriented guy getting a lot of hype, although he has improved his slug a lot this year.
I was going to say, the fact that he only has 7 home runs but a 961 OPS just kind of goes to show the type of season he's having with his extra base hits and things of that nature. He's... And not that this should be like a huge aspect to the voting, but like, what are the odds Stephen Kwan makes another All-Star game versus Kyle Tucker? You know,
I would say Kyle Tucker's got a better chance.
going to make plenty of All-Star games.
I do love me some Stephen Kwan.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, finishing up the American League with designated hitter. This one feels pretty obvious to me, although if you wanted to bump Salvador Perez to there, I'm all for that conversation. But Yordan Alvarez is the pick to me. And that's no disrespect to Ryan O'Hearn, who's the other finalist. 808 OPS, 10 home runs, 34 RBIs, 285 average. But no part of his stats measure up to the season Yordan's having. So Yordan Alvarez is kind of the clear-cut answer for me.
Yeah, we went all the same position players in the AL. I think it's going to be different in the NL. But it's just an obvious pick. Like, you can't bump. I mean, Perez has an argument at least, but because Yordan got off to a slow start this year, but at this point he's caught up. It's pretty self-explanatory, and the Astros in general are finally catching up. But yeah, I think it's got to be Yordan as well. Are we doing pitchers? I included my starter.
We're gonna do it at the end. We're gonna do it at the end.
Sounds good.
All right, let's move on to the National League, and I guess we can talk about first base because Bryce Harper just went on the injured list with a pulled hamstring.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
I would imagine that's probably going to keep him out of the game because 10 days retroactive from the 29th or so puts it right up against the All-Star break. So I would imagine the Phillies are probably going to prefer Harper, just take those extra 7 days off to get the hamstring fully healthy as opposed to participating in the event. Harper will still be, recognized as an all-star starter and things like that, but I doubt he would play. So that opens up first base as well. Did you have anyone off the top of your head that you think should get in, or is it just for Freddie Freeman?
It's got to be Freeman.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously Bryce, but then the next guy down is Freeman, and He also didn't start that hot either. Another guy who got off to a slow start in April, but he has picked it back up and is having a Freddie Freeman type of year. I mean, maybe not pacing as strong as last year, but can we really expect that? He hit 60 doubles almost. I think he's going to take over as the starter for Bryce. In the actual game, obviously, like you said, Nick, Harper will be recognized as the starter, which is why Freddie's not even included on. If you actually go to vote, it's just ballot, Harper there. So he's not even there as the second guy, but he would be the second guy, and he will be the guy who gets the nod there. And it's deserved after Harper, obviously.
Very much so. Mm-hmm. All right, moving on to second base. This one feels pretty obvious in my mind, too. We talked about him maybe 2 off seasons ago, or off season before this past one, with a guy that was very up and down in his career to this point, and we were looking for more consistency. And ever since the playoffs last year, he's been one of the best players in baseball. Ketel Marte is, without a doubt, an all-star starter in my mind. Luis Arias is not having the type of season you would typically expect from Luis Arias, so I don't even think it's that close. And I'm not really going to entertain those arguments. But Ketel Marte has been exceptional this season and deserves this without a doubt.
Yeah, he's having the season we were waiting for. We've seen it in parts of seasons, and now it's been, obviously this is also just the first half. Maybe he has a bad second half, but this is about the longest consistently that he's played this well. So I feel like that's a big win for the D-backs, and he's found his defense again. Because I remember him being a pretty good defender at second base back in the day, and then they moved him to center field. They kind of had him moving around a little bit, and now he's locked back in, and he's making the best of that. He's one of the better defensive second basemen this year, which is a huge improvement considering he was probably on the weaker side for the last few years.
I also think just him moving around positionally didn't really help him get settled to the level he wanted to get settled, which is a very low-hanging fruit argument, but it plays, and you can see the difference with Ketel Marte fully playing second base as opposed to like center field and outfield and everything else.
We don't talk about it a lot because numbers dictate most things, but sometimes guys aren't comfortable, and getting them in a position where they're comfortable makes them better, and that seems to be the case with Ketel Marte here. This is just a ridiculous season from a second baseman. And, he's kind of just kept the D-backs afloat while they deal with so many pitching injuries.
It feels like that's 6 teams in the National League if they're being held afloat by one pitcher or one or 2 hitters. It's kind of crazy. The
NL is pretty bad. Also, a quick shout-out to Bryce Terang, who is having a really good season as well for the Brewers.
Shocked he was not a finalist.
Me too.
Just gets the hype, I guess.
I feel like Terang probably should have been the second guy, but it's still Ketel Marte as the starter.
I hope Terang's still an all-star, though.
He deserves it, honestly. I'm with you.
I don't think the MLB just automatically pushes in the runner-up for voting. I think it's just that those are the finalists for fan votes. So hopefully Terang still gets in based on recognition from the league or coaching staff or whoever ultimately makes that decision.
Yeah, he's had a really well-balanced year.
Just hit a grand slam the other day. It was awesome.
Dude, which Brewer hasn't? Have you seen this?
Yeah, dude.
They're going nuts.
Slam Milwaukee. We'll work on it.
It's not Slam Diego, but
we'll workshop it.
Yeah.
But clearly, it's their game plan that's working. All right, moving on to third base. Clear cut, and the biggest surprise of the season in terms of a player exceeding expectations in my mind is Alec Baum. I remember the Phillies fans wanting this guy shipped off not too long ago, and now he's
a ton of crap about him.
Yeah, and now he's having an insane season. It's kind of nuts. It didn't come from nowhere because he was hyped up as a prospect, but it came from nowhere just based on what we've seen from him like the past 2 or 3 seasons. So clearly everything's clicked, and he's an all-star starter in my mind.
Yeah, I also voted him as my starter here, but I don't quite think it's as clear as it was maybe a couple weeks ago. Now, of course, that's when the voting was more. He probably got the most votes because he's gone through a slight dip here towards the end. I think he's still done enough to be the starter, but again, we got another Brewer here, Joey Ortiz, who has played pretty well, though he has played multiple positions around the diamond, I believe.
I mean, Brewers fans are claiming they won the Corbin Burnes trade just because of how well Ortiz has been doing.
He's been very, very, very strong. Let me see actually how many games he's played.
Which
tell me.
There is such thing as a win-win trade for those
out
there.
I think
it's
Orioles
not like
fans
Corbin
aren't
Burnes.
complaining about.
Yeah, Corbin Burnes has been pretty good.
Yeah, so he's done fine. But yeah, no, Ortiz has been really good for the Brewers. But yeah, I think Bohm is the guy here as well. Although, yeah, I mean, All-Star, it's always funny how All-Stars voting works because, you vote based on the first 60 games, and then the next 20 games are kind of just like lost because they've already been voted in. But sometimes those 20 games, the dude goes in a slump, and then and then you're looking at the numbers afterwards, like, how did this guy get voted in? But right now, Bohm still at the top of those leaderboards, so I will give it to him.
Yeah.
Although it hurts because I definitely thought he was
fun.
I thought he was a bust. I want to be right.
It's like, why couldn't Carter Kieboom be this?
For real.
Why does this have to happen to our enemies? All right. So to this point, you and I have agreed on everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we might have a slight difference here coming up.
I think this is where you and I go our separate ways, my friend. So just a quick preface, caveat, etc. Mookie Betts is clearly the answer, but he's out with a broken hand. So even though he will, in all likelihood, be named an All-Star, he won't be playing. So we can make our next selection here. Call me a homer. I'm going C.J. Abrams.
Ooh.
I mean, C.J. Abrams, you can. If we're going to go off consistency, half these guys have not been all that consistent.
That's
right.
True.
Some of them have. Don't get me wrong. Like the cream of the crop, top of the top, top guys have been consistent. But not every single guy on this. We just talked about Bohm. Not the most consistent, but still an all-star starter. If Mookie Betts is out, C.J. Abrams deserves to be an all-star starter. I mean, based on what he did in the month of April, in the month of June, that's almost 70% of the season. Yeah, it was a rough May, but who gives a shit at this point? Look at the numbers right now.
Highest slugging percentage among shortstops this season.
You can ding any all-star based on little things here and there. If you really want to nitpick, that's not the point of all-star voting. All-star voting is just voting for the guys who have been the best or are the hottest right now. That is unequivocally C.J. Abrams. It's just he deserves to be. Yeah, he deserves to be an all-star starter, and I will die on that hill. I love Trey Turner to death. He missed 2 months. Why is he a finalist? I know why he's a finalist, but he shouldn't be the all-star starter. It needs to be C.J. Abrams. He's been the best non-Mookie Betts offensive shortstop in baseball. In the National League.
I had to say that too because Gunnar Henderson exists.
Exactly. Rephrase, but in the National League.
Well, I love it, obviously. Especially with the June that CJ had, I think he's kind of I feel like you're right. We can kind of forget about that May, honestly, especially us as Nats fans. We know exactly how this team operates, and we know what was said during May, and we know why it kind of happened. So I'm kind of willing to just kind of disregard that because April and June have been so elite. The only thing with CJ right now is his defense has not been quite
It doesn't matter
there.
though. All-Stars, they don't
care
for defense. Gold Glove, Silver Slugger, All-Stars, all offensive awards. It doesn't matter.
I can't say I disagree with you. However, because it's my choice, I will go ahead and pick Ellie De La Cruz as my All-Star starter because he has been elite defensively as well as a very good offensive player and the best base stealer in baseball this season. And I like the full package there, although I'd have absolutely nothing wrong with C.J. Abrams making the team.
It's going to be Ellie. I know it is just because he's gotten
He's
the
the
hype,
guy. And
obviously, it needs to be CJ.
Yeah, we both would have picked Mookie if he was healthy.
I
think is also worth noting. I love that pick, though. I love that.
Yeah. And, again, this
it's
will
slight
be the last
bias,
time.
but at the same time, he has been good enough.
There's substance there, right?
Yeah.
And with CJ, it's the slump is not the most recent thing. It's not like he's slumping going into the All-Star break, and we're talking
it's hotter
about
than he's been all year.
Right, we're having to go back to April to pull from stats to really help our argument. No, we're talking about what he's doing right now and what he's been doing a large majority of the season. Like, yeah, he had a bad month, but he's been really damn good. So I hope it's CJ, but I do also think it's going to be Ellie. But if I had to cast a vote, it'd be CJ for sure. All right, another obvious one in my mind. He's been a revelation and one of the reasons the Brewers have enjoyed such a great start to the season. William Contreras at catcher is pretty easy for me. I mean, the other finalist was JT Realmuto, who is also hurt right now. And there's probably a couple of other catchers that you could lobby for and argue for, but I think Contreras probably comfortably tops them all in terms of whatever you would argue. And it's also kind of been a down year for catchers. Like, they're with all the talent at the position, some of the catchers are really struggling around the league. So to see William Contreras doing what he's doing, I think it's a safe but also warranted selection for an All-Star.
I don't have any issue with William Contreras being the starter, but this is my one player, I think, that wasn't a finalist that I'm going to pick. Will Smith of the Dodgers is going to be
I figured that's who it was
my All-Star starter. I really like the way he's played this year. He's kind of just having a Will Smith season, although the defense for me has really improved. But this year, Will Smith's season is better than a lot of these guys because, like you said, we haven't quite seen what we thought we were going to see with the catchers. There's been injuries. There's been underperformance. I think Francisco Alvarez is probably going to rocket up this list now that he's healthy. He's been playing very well. But
he was just hurt for like a month.
Yeah, he just missed too much time, so I'm going to go with Will Smith. I have no issue with William Contreras. I wouldn't have an issue with Patrick Bailey as the starter. Because
that's my boy.
He's been pretty much just as good in slightly less games. I think any one of those three guys would work for me. I think it will be Contreras. It makes sense. The Brewers have to have one starter because of how they played this year. Like they need to get one guy, and it'll probably be him or Yelich. But I would think it would be Contreras. But I would go with Will Smith here.
Yep, agreed. Or do we just want to knock out designated hitter because it's very obvious?
It's Ohtani. Next question.
It's Ohtani. All right. All right. The National League outfield is stinky.
Weird.
It's stinky. Like, we might look back at the end of the year or next year, and we're like, "How the hell was this guy an All-Star starter?"
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna be on Profar's page in 5 years and see this All-Star, and you're gonna be like, "What? Where did that?"
And what's funny is, I think Profar's the easiest vote.
He is. He's probably the number one guy right now.
Profar gets a vote. I would go Tatis. I'm pretty sure Tatis is hurt right now. If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so I don't even know who the replacement would be. And then the third one would be Yelich, because I think there's the pedigree, and he's having a good season too, even though it's not like eye-popping like the Barry Bonds type numbers he was putting up in 2018 when he was, MVP winner and finalist and whatnot. But he's having a solid season, so I have no problem voting for Yelich. But even those three, it doesn't feel that great. So if Tatis is out, then I guess I would vote for Teoscar Hernandez, who's having a fine season, but it just doesn't scream All-Star starter to me. But that's just kind of the state of the NL outfield. So screw it. Let's just put James Wood in there.
Hey, I'm down. Let's do it. Futures game? Nah. All-Star game.
Nah.
So I'm going to agree with Profar. I'm going with him. And then I'm also going to go with Yelich because I think on a rate basis, he's probably been the best outfielder this year. And normally a rate basis wouldn't do much for me, but this year specifically, it kind of does because there's not much here. And then because the offense in the outfield hasn't really been all that amazing, I'm going to go with a defense-first guy for my center field position and go Jackson Merrill as my third guy.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because he's had a great season.
Yeah,
he's
rookie
hitting
season too.
He's hitting fairly well. He runs the bases very well, but he's also the strongest defender out of these top guys. And when I'm building my team, I'm thinking center field. I need that guy running them down out there. So I'm gonna go Merrill in center field, and I think you could probably put Nimmo out there, but he hasn't played there this year. So I didn't want to put Nimmo in center because he's been primarily a left fielder. He'll probably make the team as well, and would deserve to in this outfield. He's just generally a solid player in general, but with this year, a solid performance is actually somewhat elite in the National League outfield. I think this is a weird group. This is the weirdest group out of any of them. But I'm gonna go Profar, Merrill, and Yelich.
I like it. Merrill's
Yeah, that's my off kilter choice there for sure.
But at the same time, like, this is the position to do it in.
Yeah,
like the NL
that's why I went
completely
there.
wide open. So, yeah, I like it. All right, let's round out the conversation. Let's pick our all-star starters for starting pitcher. Starting in the AL, who you got?
So you know me, innings, ERA. Seth Lugo is my starter. There was definitely some other guys I looked at. Skubal was definitely there. Crochet has having a really good season, especially when you look at the underlying stats. But I'm going to go innings and ERA. I'm going to go Seth Lugo's leading the American League in both. And he's been the ace of that Royals rotation, and I think he's totally deserving of it.
Yeah, I mean, you could even go Corbin Burns, too. I mean,
there's definitely multiple guys. Pitchers are definitely harder than position players.
Yeah,
I felt
I am going Skubal.
Yeah,
but
that's fair
at
too.
the same time, I really like what Lugo's doing, and I think it deserves to be rewarded. And I think he'll comfortably be an all-star. I don't think there's any risk of him being snubbed. But you know how the MLB operates. The starters are always the name power. Not that Skubal is like a household name yet, but he will be. So I'm going Skubal, but I really like the Seth Lugo pick. All right, for the National League, my NL All-Star starting pitcher for the 2024 All-Star Game is someone I just saw in person for the first time the other day. Paul Skeens.
Yo, I love it. I didn't even think about that.
Starting. Because I think he's a legit... Listen, Nats fan, Bryce in 2012, he did not deserve to be an all-star, but it was still awesome to see him be an all-star. Paul Skeens deserves to be an all-star.
Yeah, I agree. I think he deserves
it too. If he's like a legit all-star, then there's a legit like conversation for him to be the all-star starter. And the numbers back. He has a 2.06 ERA right now. Like, yeah, he's not going to have the innings some of these other guys do, but he has the stuff. He has the name. He has the hype. You tell me you're not going to enjoy that first inning seeing Paul Skeens light up the radar gun with 101. It's going to be awesome.
I think he should make the team. Maybe not. I don't know about starter. I actually love that take. I love that take.
Paul Skeens, baby.
I think he should make the team. Again, I'm going to stick with my boring ERA innings trend and go Ranger Suarez here, although it's a little bit tougher in the National League because he doesn't
got rocked up by the Marlins the other day.
And he just got rocked by the Marlins. I had that in the back of my mind when I was like, I don't know, but even with that, it got his ERA up to a 2.27 in 103 innings. So I think he still probably deserves it. Although Zach Wheeler's right there, Tyler Glasnow's right there in the innings. Wheeler is pretty close in the ERA department as well. But I'll go Ranger Suarez there. And it's got to be a Philly, honestly. Their starting pitching has been ridiculous this season. So probably needs to be a Philly. Unless they want to throw Skeens in there, I'm not going to have any problem with that.
Paul Skeens. Paul Skeens 24, baby. All right, well, that does it for this episode. We will undoubtedly react to the All-Star rosters when they're announced, I think, July 10th. So just about a week away. So in the meantime, be sure to check us out on Twitter at DistrictBSB, TikTok at DistrictBaseball. Follow myself at the Coach Moose, Trey at Reverse 2Rs 2Ss. We sincerely appreciate you listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, review, all that good stuff. Check out our YouTube at District Baseball. Trey does good work there every single week. And catch you on the flip side and see what picks we made that actually come true. So in the meantime, let's go baseball.
Peace.